Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I'm Jantar Hainogu, and I have a hypothetical question for you. What would be the correct course of action if you were lost in a castle? I'm almost positive that the majority of you would answer with things like find a way out or ask someone to help you out. But let's build on that question just a bit. Let's say, for this case, you're a 3-year-old boy. And let's say that you still don't know the concept of direction. Let's also put in that you may have the memory akin to a toddler. Like, a 3-year-old's a toddler, and it's kind of hard to have a good memory there, right? Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, I've been asking this question because it was a real thing that happened to a friend. And by friend, I mean myself. So, back when I was 3 years old, my family went on a planned vacation to England to visit some of my mom's relatives there. That's all fine and good, but the only not really fatal flaw in this vacation plan, again, not fatal, but fatal, that makes sense, is that a 3-year-old child is kinda hard to keep track of. It's almost as hard as finding or keeping track of a snipe on a snipe hunt. If you've ever had one of those. If not, I highly recommend them. There's no telling what the kid's gonna do, nor where the kid's actually gonna go. And let me tell you, I was no exception to this. In fact, I dare say I was probably the king, or the almighty king, called Lord of Getting Lost, when I was 3 years old. But I guess in my defense, I seem to not really understand how the world worked yet. Again, that's probably because I was a 3-year-old kid, and it's not because I was challenged in any sort of way. I can guarantee that I was just a 3-year-old kid. However, on the other hand, I also was one of those kids that had to be put on a leash. And I'm going to say that it was probably because I was the almighty Lord of Getting Lost. So, it would be downright bad judgment to not have me on a leash. I'm not saying to put me on a leash now. I'm just saying I was a 3-year-old that needed to be put on a leash because I would run off all the time. And that's kind of important to this story, believe it or not. So, 3-year-old child went on vacation to England with his family, and I will openly admit I didn't get to fully enjoy the trip like I should have because, again, 3-year-old boy, not really much I can do about that. And, among some of the events that happened, one of my favorite and probably most well-known stories among my peers was getting lost in Bolsover Castle. However, I didn't exactly know the name of the castle until I asked my mom recently, so if you wanted to know how I found out what the castle was called, you can thank her, not me. I had no idea what it was called, because, again, 3-year-old. And I do actually have footage of this day, believe it or not.
There you go, what a strong and clever boy.
My dad was all about recording us with a top-of-the-notch camera from the mid-1990s. Well, that aforementioned camera, known at the time as a camcorder, he was using it to look at babies on the ceiling of one of the rooms inside of the castle. Both my second oldest brother and I have 2 older brothers. I'm the third. My second oldest brother and I were in the castle with him while my mom was taking care of our sister outside. And this is all just a bit of exposition, just so you don't question where people were during this. My mom was outside taking care of my baby sister, and I was with my second oldest brother and my dad in the castle. Well, 3-year-old me got really bored of watching my dad watching the ceiling. I didn't really see any interest in art back when I was a little kid, so it makes sense, but the 3-year-old me was like, hey, let's go on an adventure. Let's go exploring. Wasn't that a good idea? It wasn't a good idea. I went exploring, and by exploring, I mean that my brother kind of led me through the castle, kind of mainly followed him around, and there was a big spiral staircase in the center of it. And in this center of the castle staircase, you can see that we went from the top or near the top. This is where I'm assuming the room was. I can't guarantee it because I apologize. I was a very small kid. And we went from the top all the way to the bottom where the basement is. Dad's up there, we're down here. There's a big separation between them, but not really because that big spiral staircase. And oh yeah, when we got down to the basement, my brother ditched me. Lovely, wasn't it? A 3-year-old boy got ditched by his brother. Makes headline news, oh no! Not really, it didn't make any news. The basement itself, like the spiral staircase went all the way down to the basement, and it was roped off with that big red rope thing. You know, it's where those two bars are suspended together with a long red rope. What are they called? They're the things that keep citizens at bay so long as they're law-abiding citizens, which apparently as a little kid I was not. But they are stanchion. In all honesty, the only thing those ropes could control for a little 3-year-old was if I could do the limbo or not under it. And the answer is I could. I went under it, and I was with my brother, and then again, he ditched me in the middle of the basement. So, do you remember my question from earlier? I sure hope so, because that is kind of noted in the title of this video, if I can point properly. There we go. Despite those blatantly obvious options and how the literal staircase was right in front of me in the basement, and if I walked right up them, just took 20 steps up those stairs, or maybe it was more like 50, if I just took those steps all the way up to the room my dad was in, this whole problem would have not happened at all. I was a little kid. I was not able to come to either of the obvious options mentioned previously, you know, with the whole ask for help or find your way out of the problem. I was a little boy in the dark basement of a castle, screaming my head off because I was afraid. That was my answer to the question. I screamed my head off. Those stone walls, they are really good at reflecting sound. Really good. You drop a pin in the dang basement and you can hear it throughout the entire castle, probably. You want to break wind somewhere quietly in the castle? That's not going to be an option either, because I could almost swear that the castle was made so that secrets could not be kept, but I'm pretty sure that's not what they designed it for. I'm just saying that because it was loud when I was screaming. And I only know this third hand, but that's what everyone else was saying. Apparently it was so loud that my mom could hear it from outside, and I will get to that in a bit, I suppose. But I will say, my voice did carry like the lead singer of an opera, except it didn't sound musical or pretty in any way. It sounded like the caterwauling doomed souls that came up from the basement. My caterwaul went through the many rooms inside the castle, and it was distorted greatly because of all the echoing that happened. So, little kid distorted caterwauls again sounded like doomed souls who were going to be, Now at this point, my dad has obviously heard my screaming. If you didn't hear my screaming, then you were either deaf or you weren't even in the vicinity of the castle. And he noticed I was gone, And I will say that I'm not certain if my brother made his way back to my dad after ditching me after this point. Again, little kid, I didn't know. Aside from him and my mom outside, who, again, heard me crying, everyone else was probably terrified of the sudden demon that encompassed the castle walls that very afternoon. Everyone's lives would probably be changed forever as they heard that supernatural call of the doomed soul who was stuck in the mortal coil in the basement. And, did I go too far there? Point is, it was pretty loud. My dad rushed down the stairs and found me crying in the middle of the basement. He ducked under the red rope as well, which, from what I'm understanding, that red rope is actually to only show if you can limbo under it or if you have to step over it like a common person. Ah! Why did I have the accent there? Shortly after him, my mom also showed up as well, and then it was a happy family reunion, except for my brother who ditched me. I'm not bitter. Why would you think I'm bitter? Anyway, my dad actually ended up recording the aftermath of the incident, and I thought I'd share it.
Hey, you're gonna have to smile and wave. Hey John, tell us what happened a minute ago. Did you get lost?
I just get lost.
Uh-oh, did we find you?
No. Yes.
Did we find you eventually?
Yeah. He got lost and we found him.
John, he got lost, and then we found him. My brother summed up the entire situation in such an amazing amount of detail, I guess. Would that be called detail? Maybe. I certainly did get lost that day, and I was terrified in the dark basement of a castle, Castle Bolsover. So, if you ever heard the stories of the caterwauling demon that made its appearance in the mid-1990s in Bolsover Castle, that was probably me. Oops.